You know, when you get older, the house starts to sound different. It's quieter, softer somehow. Like even the walls remember what used to be. I sit by the same window every morning, watching the light crawl across the porch. The same light that once fell on my son's little shoes, on toys scattered across the yard, on my husband sitting with his newspaper and coffee. Back then, the mornings were loud. Laughter, breakfast smells, someone always running late. Now, it's just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of birds outside. I never thought life would turn out like this. Not lonely, just quiet in a way that sometimes hurts. When I was younger, I used to believe that family stayed the same, that love, once built, didn't fade. But life has its own way of teaching you that change doesn't always knock before it comes in. My son, Daniel, was my whole world. He was my only child, the kind of boy who'd run home from school just to tell me about his day. He loved my cooking, always said no one could make pie like his mom. Even when he went to college, he'd call every week, sometimes twice. Then he met her. Her name was Emily. The first time I heard about her, his voice sounded different, softer, careful. I remember smiling, thinking, so this is love. When I met her, she was polite, said all the right things, smiled just enough, complimented my home. I remember thinking, she's nice, a little shy maybe, but she'll warm up. If only I had known how slowly, quietly, things would begin to change. It didn't happen overnight. No, it was little things at first. The way Daniel's calls came less often, how their visits got shorter. Holidays that used to last a whole week turned into a quick weekend. I told myself, they're busy. That's what young people are, busy. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who complains. I wanted to give them space, to let them build their life. But still, when Christmas came and went without them that year, I sat in the living room holding an unopened box of ornaments. And that's when it hit me. The sound of a quiet house can be louder than any noise in the world. I used to think family meant being together. Dinners, laughter, hugs. Now I realize it also means learning how to love people from far away, even when it breaks your heart a little. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear Daniel's laughter echoing down the hallway. And I whisper to myself, families change, but love doesn't disappear. It just finds a quieter place to live. I still remember the day Daniel brought Emily home for the first time. He had cleaned his old car inside out, wore that blue shirt I bought him for his college graduation, and couldn't stop smiling. You could tell he was proud. Proud to show her where he came from. Proud to make her part of his world. When they pulled up the driveway, I was already standing by the porch, pretending to trim the roses. Truth is, I'd been waiting since morning. I had baked a pecan pie, roasted a chicken, and even ironed the good tablecloth. It wasn't about impressing her. It was about welcoming her. She stepped out of the car with a soft smile. Pretty girl, light brown hair, eyes that looked like they were always thinking about something else. She thanked me for dinner, said everything smelled wonderful, and helped set the table. She was polite. That's the word. Not warm, not cold, just polite. Daniel looked so happy that night. He kept looking at her the way young men do when they found something they don't ever want to lose. And I thought, well, if she makes him happy, that's all that matters. But over time, I started to notice little things. Nothing cruel, just different. Like how she'd gently take over in the kitchen when I was cooking, saying, "Oh, I'll do that, Mrs. Harris. You sit and rest." It sounded kind at first, but somehow it made me feel like I didn't belong in my own kitchen anymore. She called me Mrs. Harris, never mom or mother-in-law. I told her once, "You can just call me Margaret, dear." And she said, "Oh, I don't think Daniel would like that. He always says how you deserve respect." I smiled, but my heart felt small. Respect is nice, but sometimes you just want to be loved. The first Thanksgiving after they married, I set the table for 4. Me, Daniel, Emily, and my sister Rose, who lived nearby. But the night before, Daniel called. "Mom, we're so sorry. Emily's parents invited us over last minute. We'll come by next week instead." I said it was fine. Of course it was fine. I hung up the phone, sat down at the table, and looked at those 4 empty plates. The candles burned for a while before I blew them out. It's strange how disappointment doesn't always come as a big, loud thing. Sometimes it comes as a quiet dinner table and too much food for one person. When they finally visited that December, Emily brought me a nice scarf. It still had the price tag on it, but I didn't mind. She asked about the house, my health, my church friends, all the polite questions people ask when they don't really want to stay long. They left before sunset. After they drove off, I sat by the window watching their taillights disappear down the road, and I realized that goodbyes hurt more when you know the next hello might not come for months. Still, I told myself, don't complain. Love means letting people live their own lives, even if they forget where they came from for a while. I folded the scarf neatly and put it in the drawer. Every now and then, I take it out, run my fingers over the soft fabric, and whisper, maybe next year they'll stay a little longer.
They say silence can be peaceful, but sometimes it feels like a wall. When Daniel and Emily bought their new house, just 25 minutes from mine, I was there to help them pack boxes. I labeled every box carefully in my neat handwriting. Kitchen, bedroom, living room. Emily kept smiling, thanking me over and over. But beneath her polite words, I could sense it. That quiet, invisible line between thank you and I think that's enough now. Once they moved, the visits became rare. At first, Daniel came by every Sunday, just like old times. Then every other week. Then not at all. I used to bake him apple pie, his favorite, and wrap it up for when he stopped by. After a few weeks, I stopped baking. There's no point baking pie for someone who never knocks anymore. One afternoon, I decided to call him. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, rehearsing what I'd say. "Hi, sweetheart. How's work? When are you coming by?" That's all. Nothing big. Just a mother wanting to hear her son's voice. Emily answered. She said Daniel was busy, that he'd call me back. He didn't. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something quieter, heavier, like watching a photo fade in sunlight, one day at a time. Months passed. The holidays came again. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, each one quieter than the last. My house was once filled with laughter, music, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked pies and roasted turkey, a warmth that seemed to breathe life into the walls. Now, only the faint scent of the past lingers in the air, wrapped in silence, as if the house itself has grown heavy with memories. One Sunday, I drove to their house with a casserole. Nothing fancy, just something homemade, the way mothers do. When I got there, Emily opened the door. She smiled, that tight, polite smile again. "Oh, Margaret, we weren't expecting you." Her tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm either. She let me in, though I could tell I'd interrupted something. The house was beautiful. Too clean, too quiet. There were no family pictures on the wall. Not even one of Daniel as a boy. I asked how she was doing. how Daniel was managing work. She answered every question perfectly, just enough to fill the air. Then she looked at the casserole dish in my hands and said, "You didn't have to go through all this trouble." I smiled and said, "Oh, it's no trouble. I like to cook." She took the dish, set it on the counter, and said she'd warm it later. But I knew she wouldn't. Daniel came in from the other room, hugged me quickly, then went back to his laptop. We made small talk for maybe 10 minutes before Emily said, "We actually have a dinner reservation tonight." So I nodded. I understood. I always understood. When I got home, I left the casserole dish by the sink. The smell of food filled the air, but I couldn't eat a bite. I poured myself a cup of tea instead and sat by the window, watching the sunset. That's when I realized something I never wanted to admit. Sometimes love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly through the spaces where words should have been. And yet, I still loved them both. I told myself, maybe it's just a phase. Maybe one day things will feel like home again. Because that's what mothers do, don't they? They keep hoping, even when hope feels like a one-sided conversation.
You don't really notice time slipping away until one day you wake up and the years you were waiting for are already gone. After that last visit, I didn't see Daniel and Emily much. A birthday here, a phone call there, that was it. Life became a pattern of waiting. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited for holidays. I waited for the sound of a familiar car pulling into the driveway. But waiting has a sound of its own. It's the sound of the clock ticking too loud, the kettle whistling in an empty kitchen, the floor creaking when no one's walking on it. People used to say, "Margaret, you should travel. You should get out more." And I'd nod, smile, and say, maybe I would. But how do you leave when your heart's still waiting at the window? There's a loneliness that comes with getting older that no one really talks about. It's not just about being alone. It's about being forgotten by the people you remember every single day. Years went by, and my hair turned silver. My hands, once busy with cooking and sewing, became softer, slower. The garden started to wilt, and I didn't have the energy to keep it alive. One summer, I got sick. Nothing too serious, just one of those things that remind you you're not young anymore. The doctor said I needed rest, and I did rest. But I also waited for Daniel to visit, to ask if I was okay. He didn't come. He sent flowers instead. Beautiful ones. Lilies, my favorite. But flowers can't hug you. They can't say, "I miss you, Mom." I remember one night, lying in bed, looking at those lilies on my nightstand. They were wilting, petals curling inwards, beautiful even as they faded. And I thought, maybe love is like that. Maybe it changes form, but it's still there somewhere. When I turned 70, the church ladies threw me a little party. We laughed, sang songs, shared cake. But when I got home, I found myself staring at the empty chair across from me, the one where Daniel used to sit, tapping his fingers against the table while telling me about work. I whispered to the quiet house, "You'd think after all this time it would hurt less, but it doesn't." Sometimes when I'd walk through the grocery store, I'd see a woman my age shopping with her son, laughing, arguing about brands, just being together. And I'd smile for them, but it would ache inside, like pressing on an old bruise. One evening I took out an old photo album. There was Daniel at his 5th birthday, covered in frosting. There he was at his graduation, tall and proud. And then there was his wedding photo, Emily standing beside him, beautiful and smiling. I ran my fingers over the picture, tracing their faces like I was trying to remember the sound of their voices. It's strange. The more people you lose touch with, the more your memories start to talk back to you. Sometimes I catch myself saying things out loud,
"Remember this day, Daniel," or "Emily, you looked lovely here." The walls became my listeners. The silence became my company. But even in all that, I never stopped believing that one day things might change. Maybe they'd realize that time doesn't wait, that love once gone too long becomes harder to find again. I prayed for that day, every single night. Because no matter how many years pass, a mother's heart doesn't forget how to wait.
It was a Tuesday morning. Nothing special about it, just another quiet day with the same sunlight spilling across the floorboards, the same old kettle whistling on the stove. I was watering the little plants on my windowsill. They're the only ones that still bloom for me. When the phone rang, it startled me. Nobody calls much anymore, not unless it's the pharmacy or the church. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up the receiver. Hello? There was a pause. Not the kind of pause where someone's finding words, but the kind where you can hear a person's breath trying to hold itself steady. Then came a voice I hadn't heard in years. Soft, careful, almost trembling. "Hello, Margaret. It's Emily." My heart skipped a beat. Hearing that voice after all this time felt like waking from an old dream. Emily? Yes. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I've been meaning to for a while, but I didn't know if you'd even want to hear from me. I said quietly, "Of course I do, dear. Are you all right?" She paused, a long, heavy pause, then sighed, as if letting go of a weight she'd carried far too long. "I don't know if I am," she whispered. "Daniel's gone." My hands trembled. "What do you mean, gone?" "Not dead, Margaret, just gone. Last year, he took a job in another city, a big opportunity. At first he called, we talked. Then slowly, the calls stopped, the messages stopped, and now it's been months." I said nothing. The kettle had gone silent, but its echo lingered in my chest. "And you didn't try to stop him?" I asked softly. "I pushed him away, Margaret." Her voice broke. "I kept pushing, about work, about the house, about everything. Whenever he wanted to visit you, I made excuses. Whenever he reached for peace, I gave him pressure. I thought I was helping him build a better life, but I was tearing him apart." I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence says more than any words can. "Now that he's gone," she said through tears, "I see it clearly. I didn't just lose him, I lost myself too. And I owe you the biggest apology of all." Tears filled my eyes, not of sorrow, but of softness. She started to cry, the kind of crying that sounds like someone trying to hide it and failing. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it, for the distance, for keeping Daniel away. I didn't know how much I hurt you until it was too late." And I said, "It's never too late to say you're sorry." We talked for a while, quietly, carefully. She told me how she'd found some of Daniel's old photos, how he used to talk about my apple pies, how even though we were apart, he always told her he missed home. And for the first time in years, I smiled through the tears. Because even though he was gone, I could still feel him there. In her voice, in her guilt, in the love that had never really disappeared. Before hanging up, Emily asked if she could come see me. "Please," she said.
I know I don't deserve it, but I need to. I looked around the house, the same one that had been quiet for so long, and said, "Yes, Emily, come home." When I hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the phone. The house felt different, not louder, but alive again, like the air itself had started breathing. It's strange, isn't it? How one phone call can bring both the deepest pain and the first light of forgiveness.
2 days later, I was sitting by the window again, the same place I'd been so many mornings before, staring at the quiet road that used to bring familiar faces home. Only this time, I wasn't just waiting, I was expecting someone. I kept glancing at the clock, pretending not to care about the time, but my hands had already straightened the tablecloth 3 times. The kettle was ready. The apple pie was cooling on the counter. Not too sweet, just the way Daniel liked it. It felt strange, preparing for someone again after all these quiet years. Strange, but good. Then I heard it, the sound of tires on gravel, slow and careful, a car door closing. My heart jumped before my mind even caught up. When I opened the door, there she was, Emily. She's standing there with that same soft expression. Only this time, her smile wasn't polite. It was nervous, real, almost fragile. In her hands was a small bag, and I could see the edge of a photograph peeking from inside. "Hi, Margaret," she said softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd really want to see me." I stepped aside. "You're already here, dear. That's enough." She exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath since the phone call, and walked in slowly. The moment she stepped inside, I swear the air changed, like the walls themselves were listening. We sat at the table, the same table that had seen years of silence. For a while, neither of us spoke. She looked at her hands, twisting the hem of her sleeve, before finally whispering, "I didn't know how to fix things, Margaret. I told myself Daniel was just busy, that he'd call you soon, but the truth is, I let my pride get in the way. I wanted to control everything, his time, his choices, even his love. And in doing that, I pushed both of you away." Her words came out like broken glass, soft, but sharp with regret. I poured her a cup of tea and said quietly, "You can't rewrite the years, Emily, but you can start from today." She nodded, her eyes wet. Then, from that little bag, she pulled out a framed photograph. Daniel, standing in front of a big glass building, smiling in a suit. "He sent me this a month ago," she said softly. "He's been working hard, but he's tired. I think he misses home more than he'll admit." I looked at the photo, ran my fingers over his face. That same boyish smile, that same light in his eyes. My throat tightened. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" I asked. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I think he wants to. And when he does, I want him to find peace here, not distance. I want him to have both of us again." For the first time, I saw something in her I hadn't before. Not pride, not politeness, but love. The kind that hurts, the kind that learns.
We talked for hours that evening about Daniel, about the years we'd lost, about the things we both could have done differently. And somewhere between the laughter and the tears, something in me eased. Maybe forgiveness isn't one big moment. Maybe it's 100 small ones, like the clinking of teacups, the sound of honest words, and the smell of something baking in the oven. Before she left, Emily hesitated at the door. "Margaret," she said, "when Daniel comes home, would it be all right if we all had dinner here together?" I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep in your chest, the kind that carries years of waiting. "Of course," I said. "I've been saving that seat for him."
It was late afternoon when I heard another car on the driveway, the same sound that used to make my heart race when he was a boy. I stepped onto the porch, and there he was, Daniel. Older, broader, but still my boy. He looked up, smiled that familiar smile, and said, "Hey, Mom." I didn't say a word. I just walked toward him and hugged him, tight, as if letting go might make him disappear again. He smelled like travel and work and everything I'd missed. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for taking so long to come home." And I said, "It doesn't matter, sweetheart. You're here now." Emily joined us on the porch, quietly wiping her eyes. Daniel reached for her hand, and for a moment, all three of us just stood there, not speaking, not explaining, just being. That evening, we ate together, real laughter, real warmth, and the sound of old stories filling the air. The house, once silent for so many years, finally sounded like home again. And later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat by the window, the same one where I had waited for so long. Only this time I wasn't waiting, I was remembering. Because sometimes life gives you back what you thought was gone. Not the same as before, but softer, wiser, and somehow even more beautiful. And as I looked out into the quiet night, I whispered, "Families change, but love always finds its way home."
Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe my channel, Grandma's Voice, for more stories like this. Stories about family, love, forgiveness, and the moments that stay with us forever. Tell me in the comments, what part of Margaret's story felt closest to your heart? And remember, sometimes the people we wait for the longest are the ones who find their way back home.